All right, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? How is it going? I am Is There No One Else? And I saw yesterday the Update 23 Combat Q&A was finally released. I thought it might be interesting to go through it and see what ZeniMax's thoughts on different issues with the game are. You know, read through it, provide my input. What they don't answer is probably going to be just as interesting as what they answer, to be honest. So I'm interested in seeing what each of them are. I'm going to try and scroll through, and I may skip some. I will post a link to this in the description if you guys want to read the full thing. But it's always kind of cool to see, what's coming up in the future, what they're focusing on, because, yeah. With that being said, guys, let's dive into it. So healer changes. In general, why were there so many changes to healers in this update? The weapon lines audit resulted in healing abilities getting altered to fit our standard for ability usage. This, combined with the overall desire to improve client and server performance, meant that some healing abilities which relied on layering and multicasting needed to change. Alright. How do you plan to address certain in-game content that requires the previous healing output to make it through? Vet Hoff or Luck Estes hard mode? We've been monitoring gameplay in Update 23 since it went live, and all content that was beaten before this update has beaten again by many guilds. Tactics have changed a bit, but the content is not unattainable as some may have initially feared. Alright. PvE. Healing Orbs, which is more PvE. Healing Orbs is one of the biggest changes and probably one of the biggest issues this last patch. Do you have any plans to create... Do you have any plans to create a more diverse healer platform for other classes? I kind of read through some of this before. This is going to be one thing that I wanted to talk about. Yes, we do want to have more classes be able to effectively heal within their class kit. So I'm going to spill the beans here, but they touch on this a lot in this update, that they want each class to be able to fulfill each role. And this is what we've talked about. This new combat team wants every class to be able to be a healer, DPS, or a tank. Whereas in the past, the DK was the tank class, the Templar was the healing class, and then the other classes were DPS classes, more or less. That's the new change for it. And it's not just healing. They are looking at individual combat toolkits, like more class-specific toolkits as well, which is also interesting. We'll get to that when we get to it, but yeah, like this looks like to be their next big thing is, they provided Soul Splitting Trap or Soul Trap and Entropy as big, like, generic dots for everybody. And now the next thing they're going to do is update, class kits for each individual class so that they feel unique and not everything is homogenized. What were the reasonings around the stamina healing changes? With Vigor, we wanted the choice to be a self-heal or an AoE heal, not an all-in-one wonder like it was. For Rally, as it's a weapon ability, it should be seen as weapon enhancement primarily and a heal secondary. So this is fair. It is fair that they went after Vigor to limit exactly what it was, because you could stack Vigors, you could do all these other things, and you can get a bunch of healing in a very small group, and it provided a lot of support. I understand that point of view. My only problem with it is in general they have not provided enough alternatives, which is obviously what goes in line with this. We want to have more classes be able to effectively heal within their class kit. When you only have Vigor and Rally basically as your two biggest heals across all stamina tunes, when you impact Vigor, you're severely impacting what all stamina classes can do. And so it is what it is. I understood the point of view. I would like to see just class toolkits having more stamina healing options, and I think that's what they're talking about up here. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Future plans. With the ongoing skill audits, what is the ultimate goal for standardization? Where does class identity fall in the audit? The audit is something that needed to occur before class identity could be resolved. Imagine a yardstick with inches and centimeters changing how much distance was between each one. That's what the audit aimed to resolve, providing overall structure to abilities. Now that abilities have a standard to adhere to, we can address where classes achieve their unique feel working within those standards in mind. Each class will have a distinct feel and play pattern associated with fantasy based on where their power is derived from. That's fair. It's I mean, we're year 5 into this game, so I mean, I'm not bitching about this. I can assure you that I'm not. But it makes sense to go after, like what they did. It makes sense, and then go after the class identity next. Like you want to set your structure, and then when you get into your class unique stuff that's going to be, probably vary a little bit outside of that structure. Like you want your dots to adhere to, your damage over time effects. You want all these other things. But then you have class abilities that are spammables that do a bunch of unique different things, and so they're going to be a little bit tougher. So you want to have that benchmark to adjust things to. So that this makes sense to me. It's too bad that they couldn't, speed this up. Obviously, our next patch is probably, December-ish, something like that. November, December. And so we have a few months of this where, classes don't feel unique, but I do like this idea. I do think this makes sense. But yeah, it's just going to take a little bit of time. What's the design intent for all classes? Here it is. Classes should have the tools in their class lines to be able to fill any role, with the other skill lines helping to broaden the tool set. So that's their goal. If you want to be a Nightblade tank, you can be a Nightblade tank. If you want to be a Nightblade DPS, you can be a DPS. If you want to be a healer, you can be a healer. If you want to have different, you want to have a tanky ability within your Nightblade skill line, you have it. But then you also have, DPS or potentially healing options. So I do like this. A lot of people love their one character. They play one character. They want to get, I'm not a completionist the way some people are, but some people want to get all the titles, all the skins, all the achievements on one class, and each time they go through and they balance change things, it gets frustrating. And so I understand that. I think it makes I'm okay with this change, because then everybody kind of can do anything they want. It provides build diversity, So I think that's pretty cool. Which skill lines are planned for the next ability audit update and update 24? They've finished their audit, so there's going to be no skill lines updated. It's an ongoing process over the next... we finished our audit of skill lines for now and are looking to begin the process of reinforcing class identity with a few classes. This will be an ongoing process over the course of several patches. So the next few patches will be class changes. When do you expect to start reworking the auditing champion point system? We're actually working on it internally right now, but in terms of when we're going to get something out publicly, that's not anytime soon. So this is something I was actually a little surprised about. I'm not saying it's bad because it's going to take time to address this. We could talk probably for 20 minutes about the champion point system and different people's thoughts on it. Some people believe that in an MMO, the longer you've been playing, the stronger and more powerful your character should be. So if there's a lot of players out there, like I have almost 1,400 CP on my account on Xbox, and they're of the belief that, yeah, you've been playing for a long time, you should be stronger than everybody else. I'm more of the belief that I like the CP cap. I like everybody to be more or less be equal in that department. I don't want to win because my CP carries me. That's just my personal preference. I understand the other point of view. I understand the point of view that CP is actually just a huge pain in the ass and no CP is better. I actually like that as well, but I don't get that on Xbox. So, however, they were talking about reworking the champion system back in December of 2018 or January, if I remember correctly. I remember reading an update where they were going to address this. They talked about how they're not going to update CP because they're reworking it, and now we're 8-9 months down the road. I honestly thought that Scalebreaker was going to be the patch where they were going to at least talk about implementing the new champion point system. That's what it seemed like to me, but they're not anywhere close to this, so I guess we're going to have CP for a while. In terms of when we're going to get something out publicly, that's not even introducing it to the game. It's talking about what they're going to do. Not anytime soon. So we're a ways away from a champion point system change, which I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's interesting. Stamina Magica. Do you have any plans on strengthening the arsenal of Stam versions of each class with their respective class abilities? Yes, we're looking at making stamina builds within class kits viable. However, we are more interested in providing melee versus ranged playstyles within class kits. If this results in some abilities being based on stamina, magic, or health usage, we're open to those possibilities. This is interesting. This is very interesting. Guess we'll have to see how that plays out. Seems like you're trying to homogenize all STAM DPS classes by giving them different passives, but making such a clear path with non-class abilities that makes a little difference. Do you recognize this issue? Do you plan on waiting to see what comes from it? Class skills need to fulfill the roles of DPS, tank, and support for most content in the game. Weapon lines will fill out those holes. Currently, this is not the case, and we're looking into resolving this in the future. So yeah, this seems to be like the overlapping theme from what I was reading, that they are going to update class identity. Racial balance for stamina classes could use some improving. Do you plan on addressing this? Yes, this is planned for a future update. Okay. So, yeah. What are your feelings on the class agnostic stam meta resulting from the Update 23 changes? We're aware of the various restrictions based on stamina build diversity and are looking, okay, this is PvE. In Update 23, stamina is given a decent universal stun and turn undead. I'd say it's better than decent. I'd say it's pretty good, but yeah. Can we expect to see something with similar availability for Magic in the future? It's something we're aware of and are looking to grant similar tools to both dish CC out and get out of CC. That's what's interesting to me, getting out of CC. So to get out of CC, use CC break. Are they now going to introduce a skill that allows you to get out of CC break? And that would be a huge overlapping change, to the dynamic or the mechanics of the game, I think. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but this just seems you're introducing a new rule into the combat rules that, could really throw some things out of whack. I'm not saying it's bad. We'll have to see how it goes, but yeah, this caught my eye, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Classes and skills. Why were there so few changes to the Necromancer in this update? With the Necromancer being our newest class, we've been collecting and reading all the feedback about Necromancers and are working on plans to address those pain points as both playing a Necromancer and against one. Okay. With the improvements to tether mechanics in Update 23, okay. Will Blast Bones get some tweaking to be more reliable? Yes, we're discussing methods to address the confused Blast Bones out there. All right. All right, the passive Searing Heat was changed to make sure the DK dots were on par with other dots in the game. Why was the passive changed instead of making the changes on the skill itself? The core function of ability should be easy to grok. I don't know what grok is. And the morphs and passives can stack on top of this to fulfill the flavor of a class. Change of Searing Heat was done to reinforce the idea of you're a Dragonite and this is how your dots get better. That's fair. Surge feels a little underwhelming. Yep, Power Surge, they made it to be a huge healing change, and so now it's not as good because it doesn't give major sorcery, if I remember correctly. So that's a big complaint from sorcerers, which I totally get because, yeah, that was a staple for a long time. A lot of the feedback given on werewolf changes don't appear to be action upon. Why were no additional adjustments made? We believe the werewolf is in a relatively good state balance-wise at the moment, but are continuing to monitor the live service to see how things shake out. I don't play much werewolf, guys. I can't comment too much on werewolves. Like, I was asked to do a sarcastic thing about how overpowered werewolves are and elsewhere. I don't want to go too far, but I will say that, in general, I believe having an ultimate that can last for minutes at a time, that also just constantly reapplies bleed damage effects by attacking somebody with light attacks, isn't really balanced. And so I have no problem with werewolves having a very strong howl and being able to kill people. I have no problem with them having very strong damage over time effects, but probably something that I've never done in this game is 1vx 2 werewolves with a healer. And I'm not saying I should be able to. I'm just saying that combination is damn near impossible to deal with. And when you're attacking the werewolves, they can update as they're taking damage. Their werewolf can last longer, and it's a huge pain in the ass, And so I think going after their dots makes a lot of sense. I think in general going after like some of the things that make them like very, very powerful makes a lot of sense. I do see how a lot of werewolves feel like they got gutted because they went after them in a bunch of different ways, and that's always disheartening when you see nerfs like essentially across the board for just about everything. So I guess we'll just have to play this out. I think I'll actually have to hop on a werewolf at some point. I'm just not a huge fan of it personally. So miscellaneous, adding cast times to ultimates appears to be a change most people have reacted negatively to. Why are these cast times being added? What issue is the team attempting to solve with this change? So this is probably, yes, the biggest negative reaction. Healing, dots in cast times and ultimates. Here's the response. Ultimate abilities are some of those powerful abilities in the game. We added cast time so that there's counterplay. We felt that having 3 to 4 abilities hitting you at once, including an ultimate, is just too much. You also can't animation cancel them because we don't want players to be able to instantly cast them anymore. They're just too powerful. So, obviously there's 2 points of view. I am probably one of the few people on YouTube that is okay with this change. I haven't played it yet, so take that for what it is. But at the end of the day, guys, like there are plenty of classes that do not have ultimates to animation cancel. DK Leap comes to mind, Meteor comes to mind, and people get kills with them. It's going to change. It's going to require people to go through different combinations. I'm going to miss my dodge roll in caps, which I don't currently get to do anymore, so I had to replace it for onslaught. I'm going to miss those things, but at the same time, I understand, like, I do believe that counterplay should be a thing, and sometimes if somebody is really good at animation canceling, you get hit by so many things that you don't see it until you look at your death recap. And so if you can't block or counter it, a combination, like, what are you supposed to do? And so I think there's going to be some rough patches for a few classes trying to get around this, trying to figure out new combinations. Like, the first thing that comes to my mind, guys, is I was trying to figure out a combination for, Stamina Nightblade next patch. And when you think about it, your ultimate has a cast time and your spectral bow has a cast time. They're both very hard hitting, but it's going to be tough to line both those things up. And so a lot of Nightblades that run both those things are going to have a harder time getting out that crazy burst damage. And I understand, there's going to be a thing like, oh, well, you shouldn't have that much burst. I mean, I can see that point of view, but you're either going to have to fear and then ultimate and then, hope the bow lands, or you do, you just drop the bow while the other person's going offensive, and then you fear and then you ultimate. Or, you ultimate and then you fear and then you bow. Like, I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, but it just seems kind of clunky to have 2 delayed skills back-to-back like that. So, like I said, it's going to be a learning curve for a lot of people, myself included. So I guess we'll just figure it out as we go. Our class ability is often weaker than their generic counterpart. Is it intended? As noted above, class identity is next on our list of things to hit, so it's next on the list. Our overall goal is that each class has enough tools to fulfill each of the roles. All right, so this is the same kind of talk. What is the rationale behind reducing damage of AoE to ground dots? AoE abilities should not do more damage than a single target ability on a single target. I agree. There should be a choice. If you're hitting more than 3 targets, AoE is the right choice. As it was before Update 23, AoE was always the right choice in every situation. Completely agree with this. I completely agree. I know they're talking about this in general more for PvE than PvP, but it was absolutely the case in PvP as well. Why would you run Dizzying Swing? Why would you run Surprise Attack when you could slap people with a very hefty Dawnbreaker doing 10 to 15k damage, and then you could spin to win, and you're guaranteed that your spin to win is undodgeable, and unless they block, they're going to eat all of the damage that's doing as much damage at that scaled range as your single target abilities. It just made too much sense. That's why you saw all these people running, Stamina Warden spin to win builds, Stam Sork spin to win builds. Hell, I mean, I was even running it on my Stam Nightblade in the for double AP events, because it just, why wouldn't you? And so if you're fighting a lot of people, AoE makes sense, but like AoE shouldn't be a pretty good option against one person. Like that, if I'm fighting somebody and they're spinning on me, they shouldn't be able to just actually do decent damage in a single target situation, in my opinion. So I like this change a lot. I've actually talked about this quite a bit, so I'll just leave it as it is. But I like the change that single target should hit harder than AoE. I am of the belief that melee, because you're up close and personal, should hit harder than ranged as well. But sometimes you get that gets a little tough when you're talking about stamina-based stuff versus magicka-based stuff. So, yeah. Regards to the frequency and amount of changes made, how do you choose what to change given the community's preferences for how certain things work? Outside of periodic audits, the voice of the community is taken into account when we make changes to the game, not only for class balance, but game direction as a whole. That said, we need to look at the feedback and decipher what the core of the issue is versus make this ability do X, and consider why that is being requested and what scenarios that ability is being used, resulting in that feedback. Yeah. This entire thing's probably an entire video in and of itself, and so I'm going to leave this alone for now because I've been thinking about making something like this. Honestly, a lot of the feedback that ZeniMax gets, it comes from everybody, and that's fine. That's what it should be. I mean, questers, PvEers, PvPers should all have an input into their game and into their classes and what makes their class or their character tick. However, there's a big discrepancy between PvPers and PvEers. In general, PvE guys want their characters to be stronger and more powerful all the time. And so when you take away a strong, powerful skill in PvE, they look at it as like an insult, basically. Whereas in PvP, those strong, overpowered skills can actually severely impact, player enjoyment. Like nobody's going to be upset in a dungeon if somebody's radiant destruction is just doing a shit ton of damage and melting somebody's health. They are going to get upset when they're in PvP and spamming radiant oppression is actually a radiant destruction is a viable DPS skill that's undodgeable, that always hits, and it will actually kill somebody. So that doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't for a while. It used to, though, so that's why I brought it up. So yeah, I think that makes sense. Are you aware of the extreme dot rotations that have resulted from update 23? Yes, we're aware of the current builds and rotations on live, and we're actively monitoring. Okay. PvP, here we go. Are you satisfied with the current implementation of Volendrung? Yes, it does what it was designed to do, which is to cause mass chaos for a short while. Then when it's gone, things return back to normal. That's fair. Actually, so this is my gripe with Volendrung. And I will say this as the current. I play in the 30-day campaign on Xbox, and I play on the faction that has won the last campaign, and they're just walking away with this campaign. This is once again another video in and of itself, but just to dive in on it a little bit, I do not believe that Volendrung should be able to go to the alliance that has Emperor. Like that should not happen. They introduced Volendrung as a counter to Emp. Emperor's faction should not get Volendrung. So Volendrung is very powerful. It can steamroll a map. If people aren't defending, it has that ability to do that. However, the problem is when you have Volendrung and when you have Emperor, you kill a campaign. And that's kind of what's happening. There's more to it than that. Obviously, it's the 30 days. So after 2 weeks, when the campaign has more or less been decided, people decide to leave, and then you have this population loss, and you have people like me that consider going to another faction because it's boring to PvP on blue, but you can't because you're alliance locked. And so, although I would love to fight outnumbered, I don't like running in the big campaign, as the winning faction. That normally isn't the case for blue, or it hasn't been. It's very frustrating that I can't find fights, and everything I see is I go somewhere. Like this morning, I probably spent 45 minutes at a keep watching blues zerg down reds or yellows, and it was super boring. And it was like, okay, well, I can't go fight here, and then I went and fought somewhere else, and I got a couple good fights, and then the blue zerg showed up, and it's on every faction. And it's too bad. They needed to do something about that in general. Are there any changes planned for the faction lock system? In this latest update, there are now pre-warnings when you log into the game in Cyrodiil preventing unintentional locking. We currently have no plans to remove the faction lock system. That's fine. Well, it's not fine. Sorry, if you want to have faction lock, it makes sense. So this will be my last point, and then I will probably end this video. But on Xbox, before we had faction locking, on Xbox NA, what we would have is, let's say hypothetically, blue dominates the map, right? And so blue has the inner keeps, they have Emperor, and they're just crushing. Well, people that have red and blue accounts, you get a lot of people that would hop over to their blue account to get free AP. And because they were already zerging, and so then it was just free AP to go take free keeps and get that. Well, as soon as red hopped on and red took the map back, let's say red got Emperor, you'd see all these same people hop over to their reds, and then they would PvP on their reds. The same thing on their yellows. It didn't matter who was winning. You would all of a sudden see a ton of people with the Emperor faction steamrolling the map. And so what I will say is faction lock actually has done a really good job to limit the amount of huge zergs. Obviously there's still zergs. Like there's 24-man zergs, there's 30-man zergs, but I haven't seen the 60 to 70 to 80-man zerg like in a little bit. And some of that is like the population is way down, but you don't get people that are just like, oh cool, red's Emp, I'm gonna hop on my red Sork. Oh cool, blue's Emp, I'm gonna hop on my blue Nightblade. You don't get those people bouncing back and forth, which I actually like. However, the problem with it is everybody is currently kind of forced into the 30-day campaign because the 30-day campaign gives you more transmutes per month than the 7-day campaign. Now, if you made the 7-day campaign more appealing, so weekly transmutes were a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit harder to get 25k AP on each character every week for transmutes. But if you made transmutes more appealing for the 7-day campaign, you could see a shift of people wanting to go to the 7-day campaign to PvP. And I think a faction lock makes sense on a 7-day campaign more than it makes sense on a 30-day. And the reason I say that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but this is my thought. But if you provide faction lock to the 7-day campaign, people then can go in there and they can choose their faction, and then they could PvP for a week. And then if all of a sudden, red is steamrolling the map and it's super boring and you want to challenge and you want to hop on blue, at the end of the week, you can then switch over to your blues. And then you can PvP the next week. And then you're not stuck an entire month, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever, waiting for the next campaign so you can PvP on those characters. You only have to wait, more or less a couple of days until the next week kicks in so that you can go onto that character. I think faction lock should just literally be unlocked as soon as you're done with the campaign. Like if you did it to a 7-day campaign, you shouldn't be forced to leave. Like at the end, the faction should reset, and then you have to set your home campaign every single week. And so this way, if people want to play in the 30-day, they can hop on whatever character they want and steamroll the map if they want, whatever, that's fine. But then the 7-day has the faction lock, so your alliance loyalty, quote unquote, comes into play, and there's no risk reward, or there's no, huge issue with like people that want to stay true blue, or they want to choose to be loyal to EP or AD. They can all still have their faction locked alliance. But then if all of a sudden the fights are boring, they can go, you know what, I'm going to hop on my other characters this time. It's Thursday. Once Monday rolls around, then I'm going to do this. And so I think that would address it. I think that would allow you to have faction lock still, while also not creating issues in the game. So I would like to see more like I said, more transmutes for the 7-day, faction lock for the 7-day, non-faction lock for the 30-day. Because 30 days is just way too long. If a campaign, basically after 2 weeks in a 30-day campaign who's going to win. And so then all of a sudden in the last 2 weeks, everybody else kind of hops off because there's no push for emperors. There's nothing like that. It's just kind of boring. The winning faction, people are hopping on because they're winning and they're more populated, and then they steamroll the map. So that's my thought. What Will the VMA restoration staff be adjusted due to the changes to the duration of regeneration? We have an item set audit plan for a future update, and we'll consider changes at the time. Okay, so those are the questions that they answered. They've already provided something on Cyrodiil performance, so I wasn't expecting them to, really touch on Cyrodiil performance. I'm sure they got a ton of questions about it. Not just Cyrodiil performance, open world, PvE, trials, dungeons, like everything's lagging. Everything's really bad right now. I know they have a plan that up until like summer of next year, they're going to address all these changes in order to try and, make the game better. With that being said, it's getting really bad. And, well, it already is really bad. It's been really bad for a while. It's getting, even worse to where, it's unplayable almost all the day. Well, almost all day. And, I don't know how many people are going to get to this part of this video, but, I have been asked, occasionally, like, hey, man, you should stream. You should stream this game. You should show people, playing this, whatever, because I think you should stream. And I've thought about it, and I can't right now. I don't have much time as it is, so I'd only be able to do it maybe on a Saturday or Sunday. But weekend PvP is so laggy, it's terrible. Anytime if I try to hop on in the afternoon, it's laggy and terrible. The only time I get decent PvP is if it's late night or early mornings. If my daughter wakes me up because she's hungry and then I can't go back to bed, that 4 a.m., feeding time / 4:30 a.m. PvP after you can't sleep, that's the money. That's the money time for me for PvP. That's why I don't experience lag sometimes, is because I'm playing in these severe off hours. However, like I said, anytime you start to get to at least a decent amount of population on the game, it goes to complete shit. And so I really do think they need to speed up their process. They need to address Cyrodiil performance. They need to address game performance. And they, honestly, if they just said, hey, we're going to shut down the game, we're going to shut down the servers for a week or 2 weeks, and we're going to update everything, I think most players at this point would be okay with that. I think most players would be okay with the game not existing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, so that when it comes back, it's actually fully functioning again. Because currently, it's awful. It is really, really bad. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's garbage right now. And I've heard Scale Breaker's even worse. The disconnects are terrible, and they're just trying to sugarcoat over it and introduce crown crates and all this other stuff. And I get that they have to make money, but you make more money in the long run by having a functioning, well-oiled machine than pushing out crown crates at the last second. So that's just my opinion. Anyways, that's gonna be in this video. Let me know if you guys have any questions or comments. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.